Arthur Duperrault of Green Bay, Wisconsin, was a well-known and successful optometrist. He had always fantasized of living the life of a sailor, going from island to island and eschewing the responsibilities of the mainland. To fulfill this trip, Duperrault planned a test journey, a 2-week outline of a longer trip he wanted to take in the future. His wife, Jean, son, Brian, 14, and daughters Terry Jo, 11, and Renee, 7, were excited about this, quote, vacation of a lifetime, as Arthur put it, and together drove to Florida to begin their journey to the Bahama Islands. They boarded the Bluebell, a 115-horsepower Chrysler engine 2-masted luxury yacht that would depart from Fort Lauderdale and would be captained by friend and World War II and Korean War vet Julian Harvey. Harvey, 44, was an experienced boater and an avid weightlifter who was previously an Air Force fighter pilot and instilled confidence in all on board. Harvey brought along his new bride, Mary Danae Jordan, an ambitious amateur writer and former flight attendant he had married just 4 months prior, who would help with the cooking and assist with day-to-day life. They started their journey on Wednesday, November 8, 1961, and after visiting some of the smaller of the Bahamian islands, they docked at Sandy Point, which was a small island community on the southwestern part of Great Abaco Island, where the family and children enjoyed collecting seashells and snorkeling. On the 5th day of the trip, Duperrault was having a conversation with an official who was helping him fill out paperwork to move on to the next port of his vacation. "This has been a once-in-a-lifetime vacation," Duperrault wrote on the paperwork. "We'll be back before Christmas." The sea was calm and the moon was visible through only a sliver of light. Danae prepared a Sunday dinner of chicken cacciatore and salad, not knowing it would be the group's last meal together. Around 9 p.m. that evening, after dinner, Terry Jo, 11, went to sleep in a tiny room towards the back of the ship. Normally, her sister Renee would have slept in the same bed as her, but Renee had decided to stay with her parents in their room that night. At around 11 p.m., Terry Jo was thrust into awareness when the cries of help echoed down narrow hallways of the Bluebell. "Help! Daddy! Help!" It was her 14-year-old brother screaming for her father. She then heard noises of running and, quote, screaming and stomping, end quote. And after 5 terrible minutes, she ventured out into her cabin and into the kitchen dining room area. There she saw her mother and brother lying in a pool of blood, very obviously deceased. Recalling the traumatic moment, she says she went upstairs to see what it was, and I saw my mother and brother lying on the floor, and there was blood all over, end quote. Trepidatiously, Terry Jo climbed to the hatch of the boat and slowly and cautiously looked above deck. There she saw much more blood and the outline of what seemed to be a knife. Just then she felt the large hands of Captain Harvey push her back down the ladder and slap her face. "Get back down there," he growled. He forced her back into the cabin, where, after a few minutes, he walked in carrying a rifle and paused in the doorway, staring menacingly at her. Then, after a few seconds in which he stared at her with dead eyes, and Terry Jo lay on the bed, frozen in terror, staring at the gun, he left. She stayed, frozen in that position on the bed, until oily water started to pour into the room, eventually rising up to her waist, prompting her survival instinct to overpower her petrification at the situation. The 11-year-old girl would re-emerge from her cabin and, in shock, ask Captain Harvey, "Are we sinking?" To which he would curtly reply, "Yes." Harvey then thrust something into Terry Jo's hand. It was the rope to the dinghy, a small lifeboat he wanted her to hold onto so he could jump into it from the ship. Numb from both the cold and her fear, Terry Jo let the line slip through her frozen fingers, which prompted the enraged Captain Harvey to ask her if it had become detached from the ship, to which she replied it had, causing Harvey to have to jump for it in the water. In a strange twist, whether he had actually carried the body with him or thrown it in prior to jumping, Captain Harvey brought along in the small dinghy the deceased remains of his wife, Mary Danae. Meanwhile, Terry Jo had nothing but a 2x5, 0.6 by 1.5 meter, cork life float to keep her from plunging into the depths of the ocean, along with the Bluebell, which was rapidly sinking. Almost as soon as Terry Jo had entered the small cork life raft, the Bluebell sank. Over the next 84 hours, Terry Jo survived without food or water in the open sea. She was painfully aware that her white blouse and pale pink pants would simply look like the crests of waves from afar, and that any hope of rescue was scarce. Medical experts estimate that by day 2 on the open sea, the 11-year-old would have stopped producing saliva due to dehydration. Her eyes would have burned, and she most likely would have closed them to protect them from the hot and overbearing sun. Her body would have experienced severe cramping from the lack of food and water. The isolation of her location would have loomed heavy on her mind, as she knew rescue was unlikely. At one point, a red plane flew right above her multiple times, and although she screamed and waved her blouse, they were unable to see her. The sun burned down relentlessly. She would continuously splash seawater onto her taut, burnt skin for momentary relief. With weather estimates putting the maximum temperature of upwards of 100 degrees, she was longing for the cold chill of night. However, when night came, she knew that she was liable to freeze, and thus the next morning's sun would pull her away again from hypothermia and back into the dry and blistering sun, which would scorch her skin. This vicious cycle happened from Sunday night all the way into Thursday morning. That means 4 days with no food, no water, and no shelter for this 11-year-old orphan. The cork float she was on slowly was disintegrating, and her bouts of consciousness were becoming fewer and farther in between as her organs started to fail. Later analysis would show Terry Jo was floating in the Northwest Providence Channel, and it was her shared path with the Greek freighter Captain Theo that led to her eventual rescue. On Thursday morning, Terry Jo was on death's doorstep. Nicholas Spidakis, the freighter's second officer, was on watch when a curious-looking whitecap caught his attention in the distance. As they approached what he incredulously guessed to be a human being, a mass of sun-bleached hair and puffy red skin greeted the crew. In the process of her rescue, a crew member snapped the iconic photo of the girl on her tiny and pitiful lifeboat. A helicopter took Terry Jo to a Miami hospital where, although extremely dehydrated and sunburned, she had no lasting injuries. After a week at the hospital, police questioned her about her harrowing experience, and it was through her retelling of the ordeal that they realized that the rescued Captain Harvey had not been telling them the truth. After escaping the wreck that he himself caused, Julian Harvey was spotted after about 24 hours by a lookout for an oil tanker, the Gulf Lion, that was sailing to Puerto Rico. The disgraced seafarer called out to them, "My name is Julian Harvey. I am master of the Bluebell," and was pulled aboard. Harvey explained to the Coast Guard investigators that, despite the calm sea, 2 of the 3 masts of the luxury yacht had collapsed, resulting in his wife drowning and the Duperrault family perishing after ruptured gas lines led to the burning and sinking of the ship. Harvey claimed that he was the only one not tangled in the rigging ropes, and therefore was the only one able to escape the catastrophe unscathed. After police were able to question Terry Jo, however, this far-fetched and already unbelievable story was thus proven false. What had actually happened was that prior to Terry Jo's awakening to the screams of her brother, Harvey had already drowned his wife and proceeded to murder the rest of the family with a knife, presumably after Dr. Duperrault witnessed the killing of Harvey's wife. Upon hearing that Terry Jo had survived, Harvey allegedly stuttered, "Oh my God," and then recovered from the shock, exclaiming, "Why, that's wonderful." Knowing that Terry Jo was the only surviving witness and therefore could incriminate him, Harvey checked himself into the Sandman Hotel in Miami under a pseudonym. Later, a maid performing routine housekeeping duties noticed blood in a bedsheet and realized that the bathroom was locked. Harvey took his own life via a double-edged razor blade, intentionally injuring his thigh, ankle, and throat. After further investigation into the criminal captain's finances, it would be revealed that Harvey had a $20,000 life insurance policy taken out on his wife, which, factoring in inflation, would pay out the equivalent of $160,000 in the event of his wife's death. Even more suspiciously, this insurance policy had a double indemnity clause, in which, should the insured, in this case Danae, die of an accident or murder at the hands of anyone other than the policy's beneficiary, the amount paid out would be double, meaning that as long as Harvey wasn't found responsible for Danae's death, he would get the equivalent of $320,000. This is thought to be why he killed Danae at sea and made it look like an accident. This kind of insurance scam, though shocking, was reportedly not Harvey's first. 2 of Harvey's previous boats had sunk in suspicious circumstances, and both had had hefty insurance policies on them. While in the Air Force, he had survived 2 plane crashes and had successfully parachuted out of 2 others as they crashed. Harvey's third wife and her mother had both died by drowning when the car that Harvey was driving careened off a 15-foot bridge into the water below. Police who investigated this freak accident say it was near impossible to conceive that Harvey would have been able to escape unless he had known the precise moment at which to escape the car before sinking with it. Whether this convoluted past was known to Arthur Duperrault when he put his trust and his family's lives in Harvey's hands is unknown. Some criminologists theorize that killers intentionally leave evidence of their crimes so that the details of their sordid affairs can live on in infamy. Is this why Harvey chose to spare the life of Terry Jo when he had so heinously taken the lives of all others on board? Terry Jo would go on to live with her father's sister and 3 kid cousins, and at the age of 12 she would change her name to Ter. In her book, Alone, Orphaned on the Ocean, she says, quote, "I always believed I was saved for a reason."